Thanks, everyone. I'm Kim Deyo. I'm with the Washington State Department of Revenue. Been working with public works contracts for about 25 years. Had a real enjoyment of it. Taxes aren't fun necessarily. That's not what I ever saw myself doing as a career, but I've got to make really great relationships because we deal with the same contractors over and over. I mean, there's always new ones coming on, but it's a field where you end up doing multiple contracts typically. So we get to know you potentially, as well as the public agencies that the work's being done for. So for me, that's the exciting part of this work. So could you go to the next? Thank you much. So with contracting in general, even with public works contracting, you're gonna, there's two types of construction in our construction guide. Talks about custom construction or speculative construction. For when you're doing a public works job, it would always be custom construction. So that's one thing you need to determine so let's say you're getting ready to bid on a job. Some of the things you need to think about in order to put that bid together is, where do I fall as a contractor, and what kind of taxation is involved with that? So if you're looking through some of our information on our website, you'll see custom construction versus speculative building. Think of yourself as custom. And then the next thing you need to decide is, are you a prime contractor or are you a subcontractor? The prime contractor is the one that's is signing the contract with the awarding agency. And then oftentimes there'll be subs under them. If you're a subcontractor, that means you are, your contract would be with another contractor rather than the awarding agency. So something to keep in mind there, because it's going to affect your taxability. Next slide, please. My assumption is a lot of you will end up being subcontractors on a lot of jobs. What's important to know from that standpoint is, you're going to report your income as a wholesale, and that you're still a custom subcontractor. And so there would need to be, go on to that. Let's see. So just know that with subs, there can be multi-levels of subs, and that you're typically not collecting sales tax from the contractor that you're working for. Where it can start getting a little crazy is with public road construction. And public road construction is a type of work as well as a tax classification for the Department of Revenue. So under public road construction, whether you're the prime or the subcontractor, your taxation is going to be the same. Another thing to keep in mind, especially as we're talking about this I-5 job, is that this is for work done with cities and county-owned roads. If it's a road owned by the state of Washington, this classification is not eligible. Also keep in mind, just in general, that just because a job is with the DOT does not mean that it's automatically a retail sales tax type work, because they help a lot of the cities and counties manage their jobs. And so you've got to delve into what kind of taxation is really, what kind of work and who is that work being done for, to know what the taxation is going to be. Next slide, please. So which tax classification are you going to report? If you're the general contractor, and let's say it is a job for DOT on I-5, odds are the bulk of the work is going to be retail sales taxable. Read the contract, understand what they're telling you about the work that's being done and the tax implications from that. If you're a subcontractor coming in and bidding on a job that you know is for like maybe possibly this I-5 job, but your bid's going to another contractor, then you're a wholesaler. You need to make sure and get a resale permit from the general contractor. Then you will not be collecting any sales tax, and you won't be reporting the income you receive as sales tax. You're reporting under the tax classification wholesale. Then, for general jobs jobs in general, talking about road construction type work. So, work to improve or build a new road. If that road is owned by a city or county, the work will be classified as public road construction. And whether you're the general, the subcontractor, or a multi-level down subcontractor, you all have the same tax reporting requirements. And so your income is going to be reported as public road construction, a tax classification on your excise tax return. And you will be responsible for the sales or use tax for the materials that you put into the job. And this is where, as a subcontractor in particular, my job hasn't allowed me to be involved with the contracts between a prime and a subcontractor. So I don't know what they look like. I don't know how things are given to subs as far as being asked for bids and that type of a thing. But one thing to know that is really important for your company's safety is to understand what the taxation ramifications are for your company. Because we do see, especially smaller businesses, potentially go out of business because they didn't understand that they owed use tax on a job, and that maybe they supplied the asphalt for it. And so all of that asphalt, the sales or use tax has to be paid for. And if you didn't include that in your bid, then you're not going to get, you're going to spend more than you receive. And of course, we all know that that's not great from a business perspective. So that's one of the main things that I wanted to get across here is understand what the tax classifications are or needs are for whatever work you're doing for whoever you're doing it for. I just can't stress how important that is. So go ahead to the next slide. So this is a reference page for you all. And this talks about the WACs, the Washington Administrative Code, for general construction, which also includes this Rule 170 includes road construction for state-owned roads, state and private-owned roads. There is a special rule for public road construction. If you're going to be any kind of a contractor doing road work for, especially if you know you're doing it for cities and counties, like I said, this can also affect contracts via DOT. Read up on this rule, get familiar with it, understand the questions that you need to ask when you're bidding on these contracts so that you make yourself whole when it comes to doing the work and getting paid for everything that you're going to owe. Use tax is a big part of the public road construction and paying that sales or use tax on the materials. So that's another rule to be really familiar with. And I also included, just for general drill with jobs, information about reseller permits. So these are just references. I didn't want to go into a lot of detail. We don't have a ton of time here. But I wanted to make sure that you guys knew where these things were and easy to find. Next slide, please. And also some additional helpful hints on our website, www.dor.wa.gov. There's information about the reseller permits as well as the form to be filled out and submitted. I hope you all know that there is a GIS tax rate lookup for sales tax. You put in an address or GPS coordinates, and it'll tell you the sales tax rate that's applicable for a certain time period that you designate. There's a general construction guide on the Department of Revenue site. It's written to contractors. So that can be really helpful. It talks about all kinds of construction, not just road construction. And then some information about taxabilities on highways and projects administered by DOT. So these are just meant for your reference. You can always contact us if you've got additional questions about any of it, but I really just wanted to cover some areas of where can you go to help you get information about what's going on. Next slide. So a process that I know Christina's going to talk about as well, and that a lot of people don't realize is out there, is when a public works job is done that is $35,000 or more before sales tax, there is always going to be a notice of completion filed in the prime's name that is submitted to the Department of Revenue, L&I, and ESD. We all use that general information to do our reviews. We all look at the information on it. We may look at different information than each other, and we use it in very different ways. So it's just a document that gets the process started. Keep in mind that if you're a subcontractor early on in a project and it's a multi-year contract, that we're not going through this process until the contract is actually completed and accepted. So if you're early on in the work, that can be an issue as far as retainage for you guys, for any subcontractors. So just some quick bullets about, for Department of Revenue, we actually submit paperwork to the prime contractor to get additional information on how they've reported their taxes for the job. That paperwork is submitted to my team, who then reviews that along with the notice of completion. Do things drive up? We compare it to their excise tax returns. What we're reviewing is just trying to make sure that all of the taxes were collected correctly in the first place and then reported back to the Department of Revenue. Once we know that that's all good, for the most part, if there's no outstanding balances on the account, then we will sign a release. Right now, that process is taking at least 60 days, probably, sometimes 90 days. A lot will depend on how long it takes the contractor to submit that paperwork back to us. And if you are a subcontractor for the Department of Revenue, you will not see a reconciliation. You won't have to do that. But reporting your taxes accurately and correctly is still very important because they will be looked at in a regular field audit. So go ahead to the next slide, please. Retainage. You guys probably all know more about this than I do in a lot of respects, but typically 5% is held back in retainage, either as cash or bonded. Depending on the funding of the job, we'll direct what kind of a bond is held for that retainage. One thing, as whether you're a prime or a sub, but if the prime hasn't reported their taxes, that will hold up a subcontractor's retainage as well, typically. A lot of times we have to submit liens to get that retainage in order to pay off amounts due. Anytime we have to do that, it's going to add time to the turnaround of release of retainage for the prime as well as any of the subs down the line. And if the retainage is bonded, significantly delays that process by months. So next slide. This is just for general information that there's a certain priority and the way that an awarding agency can release retainage. So that's all set by statute. All the agencies involved with this work together to make that doable, and we all want the retainage to be released in the correct way. You'll notice that prevailing wage has the first right, so a lot of times that's a hold up for various reasons, and a sub can hold that up as well as a prime. Next slide. These are just common release delays for retainage. As far as, and this is from the Department of Revenue's perspective, reconciliation is missing, contractor owes tax and they're unable to pay, the prime contractor and the awarding agency are disagreeing about final payment or the overall project dollars. So these are things that we don't have any control over, and we try to help mediate if possible, but a lot of that's out of our control. Next slide, please. And then here again, we've just got some rules and laws and helpful information about retainage and public works contracting. The RCW 6028 is a really good one to review, has a lot of information about the closeout process. And the things that we have to go through to make that all work for you. So, and then just at the very bottom there is the contact information for my team, email or phone. I've got, I usually have 3 or 4 examiners that specialize in this. This is the only work that they do. It's always a revolving door, it seems like, and newer examiners or not, but if you've got questions, if they're able to answer the question, they certainly will. If you've got if for some reason you're a subcontractor and you have questions about has the prime contractor paid their taxes, that would be considered confidential tax information, so we're not going to be releasing that kind of information to you. If you're curious about, has the notice of completion been issued yet? Contact the awarding agency. They can tell you that. So we're very careful with the information that we release. So if you're asking about somebody else's information, just keep in mind, we're not going to release that to you. Anyway, and I think that's the end of my presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kim. Next up, as a added bonus for this presentation, we have Christina Shelton here with L&I. And Christina, I will continue the slides for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Kim and I have been working together for the past 5 years, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to do a collaboration. So I am the supervisor of the contract release team. The team is made up of 4 individuals. However, I only have one full-time reviewer who is retiring. So we're in the midst of a hiring process right now. But I have a revenue agent that does part-time reviews. I also carry a caseload. And then I have a program specialist that also does reviews. So we'll go ahead and get started and go to the next slide, please. So our goal is basically to ensure equity, fairness, consistency related to the public works realm and the bidding process. through making sure that all contractors are reporting the proper workers' compensation premiums based on the hours of the affidavit. So go ahead, next slide. So in 2009, legislation required that all taxes due by the state agencies or by contractors, subcontractors, are all in order prior to releasing payments for the work done on public projects. And a review of the firm's records must be completed in order to ensure that they've reported all worker hours in the collect risk classes based on the work performed for each individual public works contract. And unlike Department of Revenue, Labor and Industries looks at every single contractor on a project, whether they're the prime, a sub of a sub, it doesn't matter. We're looking at every single one. So next slide. So Public Works is described under RCW 3904-010. And Public Works is the construction, alteration, repair, or improvement that's executed at the cost of the state or any municipality. So all public works, including maintenance when performed by contract, has to comply with the RCW 3912 and pay at or above prevailing wages. Next slide. So contract release is governed by a couple different RCWs. They include 6028, and that's in regards to the retained percentage of 5%, either cash or bond, on all contracts over 35,000, as well as the priority of liens. And Kim already went over that. So what this basically does is it allows each of the agencies to pursue or collect wages and taxes, premiums owed by any of the contractors on the project. RCW 5112 is allowing L&I to seek industrial insurance payments for any debt owed by contractors that complete work on public works. And then, of course, we also have prime contractor liability. And so just as a precursor to that, I want to make sure that everybody knows that the Department of Labor and Industries, if you're hiring a sub, does provide the availability for you to track the sub that you're hiring, meaning that if they do at any point in time on the project go out of compliance, you're alerted. So that way you are essentially protected as long as you have printed documentation of when you went in and checked, or you've signed up for the contractor tracking, you're going to get that information. So next slide. So the contract review process starts once we receive the notice of completion. So once the project is completed and accepted by the awarding agency, they should be filing that notice of completion. And that has different information that we will look at, such as the project location, a description, obviously who the awarding agency is, the prime contractor, and all of the subs. The notice of completion is not able to be completed online if any of the intents or affidavits are missing from that project. However, in that case, if there is, it doesn't mean that they can't file with the Department of Revenue. It's just not going to be able to be filed through the awarding agency portal. And I know in working with Kim over the past 5 years, they like to receive it as soon as possible, so that their review can get started. So, but of course, ours isn't going to be reviewed until we get that completed notice of completion online. So, and what we're looking at for individual contractor review is the work that they performed and the classification and the hours that they reported to. And that's really important because for, there are several different contractors, that work in concrete, or they work in, erecting buildings. And there are several different classifications that might fit, but there's always that one classification that best fits the work that they do. So we are involved in collecting all pertinent information and documents from the awarding agencies, such as bid docs. We might reach out to the prime contractor to find out the specific work of the individual subs, or directly one of the subs when needed. So next slide. When we find discrepancies, such as reporting, or, we review the certified payroll and maybe the hours on the affidavit don't align with the hours on the certified payroll, we're reaching out, making sure that those submissions are corrected. We have the ability to issue an amendment request. We can assess if a contractor is not responsive or wishes us to go ahead and do the work for them instead. It's not always the best because, of course, they would show that they are non-compliant if we do perform an assessment on their behalf. Again, we do have a collections individual on our team that has the ability to take collection actions. And then in some cases, we even refer for a compliance audit. So we really like to try to do outreach and education and make sure that there is a clear understanding of what the reporting should look like or expectations are. And we like to give an opportunity to come into voluntary compliance. However, if those actions aren't taken by a contractor, again, it can go to audit, and that does hold up the release of the contract during that period of time as well. So next slide. So to contact us, our phone number is listed. We are option 3. We work closely with Prevailing Wage, who has option 1 and 2, and then option 4 is the clean energy team. So, and then if you have questions or concerns, you can email directly to contractrelease@lni.wa.gov. And I think Julia is going to make the presentations available to you folks. So there are links to all of the pertinent RCWs and WACs that govern our program. And we welcome those questions, and we like to have them before a project starts, because it's, being proactive is always better than reactive. And I know that some of these projects can take a long time. So if you're at the start of the project, you may not see retainage release for a couple of years. So perfect. And then at this time, I think Kim and I are going to open it up to questions from our audience. So thank you so much for having us.
Recording here. Thank you all for participating in our workshop today. We look forward to seeing you at our next one. Take care, everybody.